is Susie Francois. Thank you so much for joining us for the 8th edition. Right now, we have filmmakers for the feature of films. If everyone would please introduce themselves and also give us a brief description of your film. Who would like to go first? Mandy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mandy Fabian. I'm the writer-director of Just Plus None, which is a feminist rom-com where the lead ends up single and happy. Spoiler alert. It takes place, it's a group of college friends that gather at an off-the-grid wedding in the woods. And it's my debut feature film.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Julia.
Hi, I'm Julia Camera. My film is a feature film called Stronghold. It's a sci-fi-ish drama thriller about a mother-daughter surviving in the post-apocalyptic world. They believe they're the only two people left. And when a stranger shows up, a man, their reality is completely disrupted beyond what they expected.
Sandor.
Hello, my name is Sandor Csoma from Hungary, and I am the director and the writer of the movie Heights and Depths. And the story is, it has a story about a widow who is grieving her husband who dies in the Himalaya, who was a real mountain climber, a Hungarian mountain climber. So it's a biographical drama.
Maria.
Hello, my name is Maria Giudice, and I'm the director of Elephant. And Elephant is a feature experimental narrative around a woman who experiences the murder of a young kid by a cop on her doorstep, and she cannot leave her apartment. She develops like agoraphobia and trauma based upon that experience and can't leave her apartment for more than a year. And it is through the power of her beloved community that she's able to kind of find a place to move through that experience and once again return to outside and return to her life. And it is also my debut feature film.
Thank you for that. So I'm really interested in knowing how your background or your personal experiences influence you into filmmaking and also the style that you use to tell your story that you choose. And anyone can jump in. Sandor.
I'm happy to go.
Okay, go ahead, Mandy.
Well, I was just going to say one of my favorite movies was The Big Chill. And when I was a kid, I watched it and probably shouldn't have now that I think about it. But I loved how these grown-ups were, they had these really intimate relationships. They loved each other. They could talk about really hard things. They were all flawed. Yet it was really, really fun. But there was so much love there. And I think seeing, grown-up relationships investigated like that was an inspiration for me. And then I've always just been a huge fan of rom-coms and love stories. So probably the movies, When Harry Met Sally is one of my favorite movies.
I remember that.
So so it kind of the combination of those, some like little bits of my favorite movies, and then also wanting to explore, I was kind of a mess dating and being single. Like it took me a long time to sort of figure that out. And so I wanted to also explore this idea of like how women are supposed to behave in order to be worthy of empathy, or what it means to even get married, like what being single actually means and what the most important thing. So kind of, it was a combination of life experiences and then also wanting to do something that made audiences feel the way that those movies made me feel, which ultimately is hopeful.
And what being a first time, being that this was your first feature, what was that experience like?
It was exhilarating and exhausting. It was
I'm
really,
sure.
Yeah, I mean, I had done a bunch of shorts and I was very grateful that I had. Smartest thing I ever did too was I reached out to someone who had directed a feature and I said, okay, so I've done a bunch of shorts, I've been on sets. What are the things specific to a feature that you wished you had known before you did it? And she gave me a lot of great tips. Like, don't drink too much coffee. Who knew that was a thing? But actually, coffee, if you drink too much, makes you tired after a while. So, like, take naps. Make sure you spend every night the next day preparing. You know, like, go over your next day's work when you're done with the first day's work. Stuff like that. That was just really, really helped me navigate this very specific thing. But it's such a rush. It's like running a marathon. You know, it's a huge endeavor, and it's thrilling that you get to do it.
Maria.
So my background is in experimental film, and I've also done a number of shorts, and I feel like because of my very traditional education, put off making my first feature because of peer pressures and because of like advice that I was given, where I think as a woman, you're kind of not seen to, you know, leap into the feature film space as often as our male peers are. And so I graduated, I think, grad school in like 2007, and it took me until, you know, 2022 to finally make my feature film or complete my feature film. And I think I just got to a point where I was just ready to make a feature and nobody was going to stop me. And I was going to make it with whatever means I had available. And, you know, I made it with my community and the people around me. I made it about the city that I'm born and raised in and that I love, San Francisco. I made it with very little money, and it was all my own money. And it took me a really long time. It took me about 5 years to make the feature. And I also made it within a storytelling grammar that I thought suited the story that I was telling. So it feels experimental, not by just the means of that medium, but it feels experimental because I'm also trying to find language to talk and to communicate ideas and to hold trauma and stories of trauma with care and consideration, and trying not to be exploitative even of my own story and my own experiences and the experiences of the community that I'm using within the film. And so even though it's fiction and it's all narrative, everyone, you know, participated in writing the script and writing the story. But it also does, you know, trigger those when people watch it. And it also triggered a lot of the people that were making the film with me, including myself, around experiences that we had. So, you know, making the film was my own way of understanding this kind of traditional education I had, and revisiting and renegotiating with myself what set with me and what I needed to develop for myself outside of this traditional education, and find a new model of making film that was within the means and the resources that I had, because ain't nobody, you know, dropping money bags on me, but also within the space and the community, so that I wasn't doing the same kind of exploitive practices that we find often in filmmaking.
Thank you. And since this was also your first feature film, what was that experience like?
You know, I had produced a number of feature films. I produced a film actually during the same time I was making this film called Neptune Frost, and that was a much bigger budget. It was like a $2.5 million budget. And we shot it in Rwanda. It ended up going to Cannes. So I had a lot of training ground, which is why I say I was ready, because I had produced a number of features to say, like, well, why am I not making my film? I'm making everybody else's film. Why am I not making my film? So when I came to my own film, it became about patience with myself to make the film that I wanted and to do work that I thought was really important for me in understanding cinema, which was like, why are we doing 12-hour days where everybody is completely trashed at the end of the day and nobody's doing their best work? So I made my days 6 to 8 hours long. People showed up and did their best work within those hours, and they came back refreshed. You know, I did work where my participants that were in the film would have, because most of them were Black and brown, they would have issues and things that happen to them on the way to set. And instead of being like, hey, let's go, let's shoot, I like took the time to say like, hey, what happened to you? What do you need to get off your chest? Let's have a little tea session, and then we'll get to shooting, because that time has already been baked in, and I can allow you to decompress, and then you can do your best work. Then you can get 8 hours of sleep, and then we can come back and do it tomorrow. So the lesson that I will take on with me after my feature film is do it the way you want and how you want, in the time and in the space that you need to do it, and don't let anybody pressure you to make a film a certain way. And also that the only competition you ever have is what you are doing, right? You're only competing with yourself and the last film. And so that's my meditation that I sit on.
Thank you. Julia.
Hi, just want to recognize I'm here with my film students in the back. Say hello, everyone. Since this Q&A was happening during class, I'm like, hey, I'm going to make it part of class.
Get them started early, right?
Right. I know, right? I'm like, I'm sure like they're loving hearing all these stories, right? From all these talented filmmakers. So my film, the making of that film started more than 10 years ago when I wrote the first draft. And it went through so many like, oh, it's going to get made this time. Oh, there's a producer now. Oh, there's an actor now. And everything fell apart. And then when the pandemic hit, and I found myself spending, every minute of every day alone with my daughter, the story really became real to me. I felt like I lived it. So right at, at the tail end of the pandemic, which maybe is now, I don't know, who knows, right? It's like, is it still going on? Like COVID's still a thing. But I feel like as the world started to open up again, I saw as like, this needs to be my next project because I've now lived it. And I've always loved sci-fi. I always loved seeing, that character of, the man isolated in the woods, right? The survivalist. And I feel like I haven't seen a female version of that character quite as often. Especially, I haven't seen enough, Black and brown characters in that situation. I feel like those types of sci-fi films tend to be male and white centric. So I wanted to make sure that I brought my own experience to it and made sure that my cast and my crew were very much diverse and representing of the world around me as much as I could. And we also didn't shoot 12-hour days. We shot 10-hour days. And yet I felt like I could have used the extra time every day. Like I could have used the 2 more hours. But it made a difference, especially because we were kind of isolated. I feel like we were all living this film a little bit too. We had no cell phone reception where we shot in Thousand Oaks in Los Angeles. We had to go up a mountain every day and we had no cell phone reception. We had to go down the mountain to be able to call people. So it definitely felt like we were starting to live like the characters did. And then post-production was a whole nother can of worms, but I definitely have always loved the indie sci-fi self-contained story. So I know I always wanted to make something like that. And it took me a while to get to a place where I could get everything in place to make the film. And I think it happens often for women where we feel like, oh, we're not ready, because we're being told we're not ready. And then we have to go, well, ready or not, here I come, I'm going to do it.
And was this your first feature?
So it's actually my second feature.
Okay.
I've written a few other films. This is the second one that I've directed. My first one was an experimental film that I shot like mostly in one day with all improvised dialogue. And the idea was to just really experiment and see what kind of performance I would get from the actors without like a formal script. And it was a great experience, but definitely after that film, I'm like, now I want to make your standard, here's the story, let's build it from the script. Especially because I'm a writer. So I had days when I felt like, am I cheating myself by making a film with no script? I'm a writer, but yeah, this is my first I guess, formal feature film, right? Where it's not an experiment. I had a script. I had all the things in place that I had to have. And I shot it in more than one day, which was also part of the experiment of the first feature. That film's called In Transit, and it's available to be seen in a lot of different channels out there, if anybody wants to check it out.
Thank you. And what about you, Sandor?
I was really interested in mountain climbing, and I really followed the results and the success, and also the tragic moment of the Hungarian mountain climbers, Zsolt Erős, who died in the Himalayas in 2013. He was the most successful Hungarian mountain climber who climbed 10 mountains, which is above 8,000 meters. But I didn't want to make a usual hero movie about a mountain climber, because I think we have already seen a lot, something like that. And then something else happened in my life. My mother diagnosed with cancer, and when I took her to the chemotherapy and other treatments, and I saw her how she loses at least 30 kilograms or something like that, and her hair becomes fewer or less. Then I as a self-defense method, I started to think about the loss, maybe the future loss, or maybe the grief. But fortunately, my mother defeated the cancer, and now her condition is absolutely good now. But because of this experience, for months, more months, because of this experience, I started to be interested in the feeling of loss and grief as an artist or as a director. And I realized that there were not too much movies about grieving, especially in Hungary. So yeah, and some days later, my mother bought me a book which contained interviews with Hilda Sterzer, who is the widow of the mountain climber I followed, who died. And in this interview book, she tells a lot about her grieving. And I realized that that was the book, and I realized that all of the things I'm interested in, a little bit of mountain climbing, a little bit the character of this Hungarian mountain climber, but more the feeling of the grief and the loss meets together in one person, the widow Hilda Sterzer. So I realized that I would like to make a movie about her and about this period of her life, because I realized that sometimes not that people is the hero who is on the mountain, climbs the mountain and dies there. The real hero is the one who has to be alive, who has to stay alive, and has to carry this burden, the tragic death of the one she loved. Mm-hmm. So 2 days later, it was like a destiny. I met this woman, Hilda, in a supermarket, and we haven't met before. I just knew her face from this book, and I went to her and introduced myself and told her that I would like to make a movie about her life. So that's how it started. And then after the movie, the book became quite famous in Hungary. So now there is a second edition of the book with the poster of our movie. So I bought it to my mother and gave it to her.
Wow,
Because
that's
she was the one who started everything. So yeah.
That's an amazing story. And throughout the film, I did see how the reaction of his wife, and having to take care of the daughter as well. So that was very obvious throughout the film what she was going through.
Yes, and because she was a mountain climber, her feeling were not that usual. Maybe a little bit unusual. The reactions that she gave in the interviews or to the media or to other people. So that was somehow very interesting for me to make the audience, to let the audience understand how she felt and how she reacted and why.
Thank you. And Mandy, with your film, it's quite different from, well, actually all the films are different, the stories. I love the story and how it doesn't solely focus on the bride and also Jess. There's also, relationships between all of them and the guests as well. And if you can just tell us why you chose to do that.
Yes, I think I definitely, I wanted to explore love relationships and also adult friendships. One of the things way early back that also inspired me in this movie is I had my first, I'm sorry, it's going to get loud in Europe. Excuse me. I had my very first kind of almost I want to say a friend breakup. I had a moment where I thought I was going to lose a friend. And so I wanted to explore their friendship, but there's so many different ways that people fall in love, have friendships. Everybody needs something different. I think we are all very quick to say, this is what a friendship looks like, or this is what romance is, or this is what makes a good marriage. And it's just not true for every person. And I've always found that really fascinating, how I could see a couple and be like, well, I give it 3 years and they're happily married 21 years later. And it would be a nightmare for me. And it totally works for them. So that was something I really wanted to explore. And just the way that I write, I love doing ensemble stuff. It's a pain to shoot and it's more expensive, but I love exploring a bunch of different relationships. And I always start with the beginning and the end. So I take a character and I think about what I want to explore with them or what they're wanting to explore. I think of where they are at the beginning of the movie and I know where they are at the end. And it's this interesting unpacking where in the writing process where you go, how do they get there? Is that you have to constantly keep checking in with who they are as a character and then how they would change if they would change. Because some people, their whole lives, they don't change, but it is more fun for me in a movie if there's something that shifts for them, whether it's a tiny, tiny little shift or it's a massive, oh my God, they're a completely different person at the end of the movie.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you. Julia, the relationship with the mother in your film where she protects the daughter and I guess from the outside world. So what I got out of it is in the beginning, it's wow, this woman, she really cares for her daughter and trying to figure out where the movie was going. And I guess, you get invested if you can just tell us a little bit about that. You think that she's a good person because the way she protects her daughter.
So I think what was fun for me in developing that character. So originally that character was a father, not a mother. And it wasn't until after I had been toying with maybe this is a mother-daughter, not a father-daughter thing. And it wasn't until after the pandemic that I'm it is a mother-daughter thing. I lived it. I have to rewrite it. But what was always fun for me was to understand where that character was coming from, right? And and the fact that I wrote the first draft even before I was a parent, I feel like the story has lived in me even before I had a child to really feel that. But it is this, you know, parenting always ends with the child leaving in some way or another. And how desperate it can feel to watch your child grow up and not need you as much, and want to go out into the world, and you know, and that necessity that we feel to like hold on desperately to that kid. And how far would we go to hold on, you know, to our child? Now in my story, there's that level of like, oh, there's also danger outside, right? There are all these other things that aren't good for you. But I think at the core of it, you know, take the sci-fi-ish twist out of it, and it's really just about a mother desperate just to have a little bit more time with her kid before she grows up and goes out into the world. And I think getting into her head, into the mother's head, and really understanding where she's coming from and why she's doing the things that she's doing, and never seeing her as anybody but a desperate mother who just wants to take care of her kid, be with her kid for as long as she can, and terrified of losing her. I think that's really what was fun for me, just to explore, like, how far would she go, right? And as a mother myself, I'm like, I can let that character do a lot of things that I would never do personally. And the same thing, I feel like for all the characters, I allow them to do things that, you know, make choices that I would never make. But I think that's the fun part of writing and creating, right? It's to explore some the dubious choices that, you know, maybe we shouldn't make in real life, but we can definitely make on film, and watch the characters have to deal with their own choices. But yeah, at the core of it, it's like she's very morally ambiguous, I would say. But when we first meet her, I feel like everything she says makes perfect sense.
Yes.
And then it's not until the story progresses that we get underneath all the different things that she's really bringing to the story. And that, I feel like those are the stories that attract me, where you put just a few people in a room and watch them, you know, interact with each other, tear each other apart, you know, come together, work together, and all the different things that I think makes us human.
Thank you. Maria, I noticed in your film you have an image of an elephant. And if you can just like go into that, how you used it, and also why you integrated that into your film.
Oh, great question. So there's an image of an elephant, and there's a lot of little Easter eggs that are kind of like saying elephant, elephant, elephant again in the film. And so there's a massive elephant plant in the film. And, you know, when I was first making the film, people think I made the film during the pandemic, but I actually started the film during the Ferguson riots. And in San Francisco, we were also having a number of police brutality protests against a few people, that I think like 3 or 4 people that had been murdered by the police during the same time in Ferguson. And it was this elephant in the room as I went to work every day, as I, you know, went grocery shopping, as I, you know, moved through these spaces that were not engaged in the same, you know, protests against police brutality. And that elephant seemed to be following me everywhere I went. And so that became kind of my sense of making the film, is like, how do you speak to the elephant in the room? And as the elephant like gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you feel more and more suffocated by this elephant, how, when, what's the thing that's going to basically get you up to really look the elephant in the eye and start to address these issues that are happening in your life, and stop ignoring them, and stop getting up and going to work every day and just putting it in your back pocket, which many of us, you know, can't do because we all have to go to work and make rent, but that is a toll on us, right? One person gets murdered at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and you are still at work until 5 p.m. that day. And then you go home, you take care of your kids, you try and sleep that night, and you get up and you do it again. And then on Thursday, another person gets murdered. And so I felt that, you know, the elephant was a myriad of, you know, issues that have to do with racial violence, that really hit Black and brown people really hard, that we have very little time in our lives to really address and really talk about the grief of the people that have been murdered, whether we know them directly or indirectly. Particularly the Trayvon Martin killing reminded me of my little cousin, and he looked very much like him. And so I was very kind of like connected to that murder in a way that really moved me and really caused me every day to just really dwell upon it. And my mental health was really, disintegrating because of it, as the character in the film is. And so for her radical action is to say, hey, I'm going to rest and I'm going to address these kind of traumas and issues and mental health and fear that I have in my life through therapy, through, exercise, through spirituality. And that radical action of rest and napping and taking time off and telling your job, like, I'm taking a mental health day because I just witnessed somebody get murdered. That is huge for our lives. And I think that becomes still the elephant that I see every day, even the elephant of COVID, right? Like COVID killing so many people during the pandemic, but really hitting Black, brown, and poor people and unhoused people the hardest, and those vulnerable communities really being, connected to who we are, and us really just not knowing how to address it or what actions to take. And constantly that elephant just got bigger and bigger and bigger for so many of us, that our mental health really needed to be addressed as we are in still, the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic or moving into a new pandemic, whatever this is right now. We have to take time to address, our mind, our body, and our spirit.
Good points. Very important that we should address those, or at least try to. And a lot of times people don't always, we keep going because I guess sometimes we're forced to as well. Thank you for sharing that. Sandor, excuse me. I noticed throughout the film when they're climbing the mountain, I liked how the camera was used, and sometimes it was a little shaky, and it also made, I guess it could make people feel nervous, to get the feel of what's going on, and, climbing a high mountain. If you could just elaborate a little bit on that. And also I read that you said that this story, the issue, there's a taboo in your country. If you could also explain that.
Yeah, I think this is a taboo, but not just in my country, but more in the Western culture. There are many taboos, but I think the loss or the grief or the death is something like that also. We just don't want to talk about it, and that's why we can't really behave. We can't really know how to behave with someone who just lost somebody, or we can't really know how to behave when we lose somebody. So so that's why I was thinking about it should be good to make a movie about a taboo topic like death, like grieving, because if in the reality we have no words to communicate about these kind of topics, maybe the art has a power to show a mirror to ourselves, and it starts the communication. And after the movie, or after arts, or after this kind of communication, we will find the words how to communicate about these topics. So that was a little mission for us, and yeah, because of the movie, there were some very, very nice presentation and very nice Q&As, for example, after the screenings. So I hope if we just make a little step with our movie, we are happy because of it. So yeah, and what was the other question? That the camera movement?
Yeah,
the camera?
use of the camera when it would shake.
Yeah.
And the Photography.
Yes, it was very important for us to show visually how the main character feels in situations. So yeah, for example, we used this handy cam shaking camera sometimes, but also we used another visual trick. I don't know if you have seen it or not, but it's with the aspect ratio of the movie. The movie starts in a 16:9, so it's in a normal size, we can say, wide screen size, but when around 8 minutes or something like that, when the widow gets a telephone call that her husband is in trouble, the aspect ratio starts very, very, very slowly. You can't really see, but starts narrowing, and it comes narrowing till around the 80th minutes or the 85th minutes. It becomes just a square 1:1 frame. That's how we started. We wanted to show the how our main character starts to close her emotions and tries to not show to everybody, and then when she cries first time in the movie around the 85th minutes at the climax of the movie, when she starts to cry and starts to feel the emotions again, at first time, the aspect ratio starts to be wide again slowly. So we really wanted to show visually somehow the feelings what she.
Thank you. Was there anything that was, well, actually, what was the most rewarding aspect of creating your film for you personally? And anyone can answer that question. Mandy.
It was a dream come true. I mean, there's something just pure about, oh my gosh, I've been dreaming in movies and thinking of movies and studying movies, and I was a film major, and getting to, whenever I write a movie, because I do write my own movies, it kind of breaks my heart. It's almost like people come to you and you want to help them. They come to you and you want to tell their story, these special, sweet, interesting stories, and you want to be the facilitator for that. But movies are this giant endeavor, such a team endeavor, and we're still figuring out where film belongs in terms of, gosh, how it gets funded and how you can get people to pay for content. And the industry is really, it's interesting because, in terms of being sustainable, it's in a real tough spot. But in terms of being creative and thriving and having people have so much access to great technology to make their vision, I think we're in a better place than ever. So I think that bridge needs to be met. So for me, I was grateful that I got to tell this story, and the tricky part about it was not pulling punches, not shying away from the character's sexuality, not shying away from the tough, flawed things that these people say and do, but just really going for it. And I'm very proud that I did that, because I think, for me anyway, I love it when movies are entertaining, but I also love it when they say something that's really moving, important, fresh, something I haven't heard and seen and felt before. So I think my movie has that. So I'm that's the accomplishment for me.
It does. Thank you. Julia?
I think it was the collaboration with all three of my lead actors are also producers on the film. And they mentioned to me that like they usually don't have the access to the script and the creative vision of the story nearly as much as they did for this film, where I absolutely wanted their opinion. Any input that they had on the script, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's work it out. Let's figure it out. So it really became kind of our film in a lot of ways, where like we all put so much of our own, you know, blood, sweat, and tears into it. And I know for my actors, my lead actor, Oliver Rayon, he had already produced before. But my lead actress, Bianca Santos, had not produced before. And when I invited her to come be in the film, I'm like, I want you as a producer because I see what you can do, right? Given this type of opportunity. And she made an amazing producer. I hope that she will go on and produce many other projects. But I feel like actors tend to have great instincts when it comes to story and just character in general. And usually, you know, for a lot of other directors, it's like, do what I'm telling you to do, you know, do as I say. And I'm kind of the opposite. I want to see what they're going to bring to the role. I want to hear what they have to say. So I think just the level of collaboration we all had in like making this movie happen. The brilliant actress that plays the mother, Jacqueline Fleming, also brought so much to the project, also as a producer. So yeah, all three of my actors are producers, and I feel like it became our film. In a lot of ways, it's like we had no one to answer to but ourselves, right? It became kind of like our baby, and we all raised it together. And I think that's what I like the most, was just being able to create something that meant so much to all of us. Like they were so into the roles and the characters and everything that we did. And I loved this level of collaboration, right? Where it wasn't like, oh, you know, you're going to do it because I'm telling you to do it. It's like, how can we make this better together? And I think that's the part that I really love the most and miss it.
Thank you. Maria.
For me, I think it really becomes the process from which I make the film and the process of which I exhibit the film. So one of the most probably special moments for me is bringing as many of the cast and crew as I could with me for the premiere, which was at Ann Arbor, and watching, you know, people who had never really been at a film festival before, but particularly never been to an experimental film festival before, and disrupting that space a lot because we had, you know, Black and brown people at a very kind of like prestigious and I will say elitist film festival with very few Black and brown faces, and introducing them to filmmaking, but introducing them to filmmaking in a space that I could try and make as safe as I possibly could, but have all of us together on stage talking about working on the film, talking about their own impact that the film had on them, and the impact that they are taking on after the film, and then going off to watch other films and feeling like maybe there was a piece before they had worked on my film and before they had went to Ann Arbor that experimental film wasn't really in their lexicon, and so now they became experimental film enthusiasts. They understood avant-garde filmmaking. So not just the process of working on the film, but also, you know, now having this space that they hold for cinema in their lives that, you know, can influence them and impact them in the same way that it had impacted me. And I tried to carry that on through all of the film festivals. So each film festival that I've been on, I've been able to take one or two or three people with me on each film festival, and each film festival has had a different impact. And, you know, in my radical little heart, it is really just disrupting these spaces and trying to really address directly the privilege of these film festivals to say like, hey, here's the people, the community, folks who can really use and really be impacted by cinema, but also be impacted by the beauty of a film festival space where they get to have these crazy, awesome conversations about films and what they just saw on screen, and take these conversations, you know, into their lives. And it's not just about the people that can afford the ticket. It's about the people that are local and within, you know, the community, and people who are marginalized on the edge that cinema can impact. And I will hold on to that as I go into my other films, and just really figure out that funding and that financing that really allows me to make that community impact and to make that larger impact with my community.
Thank you. Sandor?
I'm sorry, what was the question? Because I didn't get it.
What was the most rewarding aspect of creating your film for you personally? If there was.
Yeah, well, the writing and the shooting was quite traumatic for me because of the topic. It was a very, very difficult time for me, because I was when I was sleeping, I dreamed of death a lot. So it was very stressful, also for me, also for the actress, because it was a very, very difficult role, and it was the first feature role for her, first main role in a feature movie, and most of the crew. For the most of the crew, it was the first feature movie for them also. So we were quite, we were rookies in this filmmaking. But at the end, when we met with the, there were test screenings, and I showed it to my friends. How do they react of the movie? And one of my best friends asked me that, told me that he liked it, but he's not sure that there will be anybody who cares about the topic of this movie. And I was started to think that, oh, maybe it's just me who are interested in this topic, and maybe nobody will understand why is it important. But then after the movie screenings and the Q&As, a lot of people went to us and told that the movie helped them in their loss. So maybe that's the thing that I appreciate that much, that a beautiful crew came together and made their first feature movie, and it could help other people in their loss. Maybe it's not a loss of a people, of a loved one, but maybe a loss of a job, for example, or just a breakup, a couple breakup. So in many aspects, hopefully the audience could understand the movie, and this is very rewarding for us.
Mm. Oh, of course. After your screening, there were several Hungarians in the theater, and I was kind of like telling them about the film, telling them that it was based on a true story, and they were like, yes, we know. We know they heard about it. And so I have to say that was something positive as well, being that I was thinking that I was telling them something new that they were not aware of. So they did hear about the story. Just wanted to share that with you. I have two more questions. What was it like? Well, actually, what is it that you guys look for when you're working with crew members? And anyone can share that.
All right, I will jump in. I always look for people who want to be a part of the process, for sure. Experience is great, but I'm the one that, like, I'll hire you if you want to learn this craft, and you can learn it on my, I'm a teacher, I'm here with my students, but I'm like, you can learn it on my set. And I'd rather like hire someone who's hungry to learn and to do it and to have the credit than the best possible person on the planet. So I look for collaborators always.
Thank you. Mandy. Oh, can't hear you.
Unmuted. There we go. Oh gosh,
Okay.
sorry, I couldn't unmute.
Okay.
You know what? I'm so with Julia. I love it when people get to go up a step on a set. You know, they get to try a job they've been really passionate to try. And I love to, we had the greatest thing because our movie was on a campground. So we had to have people who were willing to camp for a few weeks. And it was amazing because everybody we got was so chill and game for anything and like not fussy. They were all like, yeah, let's go to the woods for 3 weeks. So we got a really great, I think, energy. People need to be game, calm, happy to be there, happy to play. That's what I look for.
Great. Anyone else would like to briefly share?
I'll jump in. I agree with everything that both of the filmmakers have said. And I will say for me, I just, when making this film in particular, because it was about very sensitive subjects and about particularly cultural experiences, I really made sure that every single crew member that was on my set wanted to be there, wanted to be in this space, in this tiny little community that we were making when making the film, and that they understood the subject matter and the experiences, even if they were not a part of the culture and had not had a direct experience, they had understanding outside of making this film. And I felt that it was really important of that cultural competency when working together, and that it made a huge difference when we were shooting the film, because that safe space was created for the people who had direct connection to the issues and the traumas that I was speaking about, so that they weren't having to explain themselves on set, and we weren't having to start from a blank slate of explaining the impact of racial violence to communities of color. It was kind of starting in a middle place where we were all on the same page, and we were all expanding our ideas of what this film meant to us and why we were working on it, and how the story could expand based upon our own work that we were doing in our own communities. And I definitely will move forward on that, because I tend to work on very much movies that are about subject of race, class, gender, and cultural issues. And it's been very few and far between where everyone on the set has been able to have a deep understanding. And now I just have to say I have to require it because it's a lot of work on the rest of the crew and the cast, who has a very connected experience to educate everyone else on set. And honestly, we just don't have time for that. And in my understanding, like, people should really be doing that work on their own to be understanding what are the larger issues that are happening, especially within this country and around the world, that are affecting different communities in a really life or death situation. So that's something I'll probably hold as I move forward.
Thank you. And Sandor, because we're running out of
Okay.
time, if you just briefly tell us what you look for when you're collaborating.
For me, the positive energy, of course, is very important. But I really like if the crew members are. Sorry, is the same question that it was?
Yes.
So with the crew, yeah, okay. So with the crew members, I really like if they are not just doing what I tell them, but they feel that it's their movie. The movie is also their movie. So maybe they honestly tell me if they think something else, if they think it's not the right reaction, how the character reacts or something like that. So there will be little arguments, but these kind of arguments is positive, because the most important is the movie, and most important is the reality, and so we would like to make honest movies. So even though we have little arguments in the crew, if everybody knows that the most important, it's the movie must be the best as it can be, then every energy is positive then in the crew.
Thank you. And if you guys can just tell us where we can find you to learn about your other projects that you're currently working on, that would be great. Website, your Instagram or other social media handles. Mandy.
I'm on Instagram at MandyFab, MandyFab. And I also have a website, mandyfabian.com. And a lot of my short films and stuff are up there. And I keep it updated with all the new stuff. And Jess, the movie Jess Plus None, has its own website, jessplusnone.com, and also social media at Jess Plus None. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Julia.
I'm on Instagram. It's julia.camera.writer. That's my profile on Insta, and you can find me on my website, which is just my name, juliacamera.com. And you can watch Stronghold on iTunes, on Amazon Prime, like name a thing, it's probably there. And of course, online here at the festival, right, as it's happening.
Yes. Maria.
I can be found on Twitter, or which is now known as X, or whatever everyone wants to call it now, and Instagram at Maria A as in Annette, my middle initial. Do not tell anybody. Judice, pretty much on every platform. Maria A Judice, and please hit me up. I love chatting with anybody about the film. Hit up my DMs if that is still allowed these days, and talk to me about the film.
Thank you, Sandor.
Unfortunately, I don't have any web pages, but I'm on Instagram and on Facebook. My Instagram is my name, CSOMA.SANDOR 85, 1985 when I was born. So yeah, if anybody writes me, then I can send my short movies, or also this feature movie, a secret link of this feature movie.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I really appreciated this and enjoyed this, learning more about your films and yourselves as well. The films will be up on SparkFest until October 1st. If you get a chance, please watch each other's films, learn about them, support each other. Thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Susie, and thank you to the festival too.